You think walking away was the answer. That silence would erase the storm you left behind. Let me tell you something. Your absence is louder than any words you ever spoke. And right now, it's getting into his head. There is a force in presence that cannot be measured, a weight that lingers in the heart, in the mind, in the very bones of a person. When you are there, truly there, your presence communicates more than 1,000 speeches, 1,000 apologies, or 1,000 promises ever could. But absence carries its own power, a power that is silent yet deafening. When you walk away, when you choose to step out of someone's life without explanation, without confrontation, without a word, you do not simply remove yourself from their world. You leave a void, and voids as empty as they seem are never harmless. They fill up with questions, with confusion, with doubt, and with a gnawing ache that refuses to be ignored. Presence shapes, nurtures, and reassures. Absence teaches lessons no one asked for, but everyone feels. When you walk away from someone, the impression of your absence is never subtle. It does not politely fade into the background. It strikes like a shadow in a dark room, unexpected, disorienting, and unsettling. People are wired to notice what is missing, to sense the gap in their lives. A missing presence becomes a constant reminder of loss, of abandonment, of the connections that could have been. It seeps into their thoughts, infiltrates their memories, and forces them to replay every shared moment, every laughter, every argument, and every glance, as though trying to reconstruct the puzzle you left behind. And while you may think your leaving gives them space, what you are really doing is planting seeds. Seeds of doubt, seeds of reflection, seeds of a realization that you mattered more than either of you could have imagined. Presence is not about physical proximity alone. It is about being invested, being engaged, being undeniably real in someone's life. When you are absent, however, the mind starts to invent what it cannot see. Absence is fertile ground for imagination, and imagination rarely paints kindly pictures. It twists reality, magnifies mistakes, and makes every small moment of tension feel like a mountain. When you leave, you do not leave someone neutral. You leave someone unsettled, questioning themselves and questioning you. Every laugh you shared becomes a memory that stings. Every conversation becomes a ghost that haunts. And every silence that follows your departure becomes an echo louder than any argument ever was. Absence has a way of amplifying what presence used to quietly confirm. There is also a moral weight to absence that is easy to underestimate. When you are present, you carry responsibility, yes, but also opportunity. The chance to guide, to heal, to affirm. When you leave, that weight does not disappear, it transforms. Your absence becomes a mirror reflecting what could have been, what should have been, what you chose not to be. The mind cannot easily ignore this reflection. Nights become longer, days feel heavier, and the heart struggles to reconcile the loss of your presence. And the cruel truth is, the more significant your absence, the more pronounced the impact. Walking away from someone who depends on you, who believes in you, who loves you, is not just leaving. It is leaving an impression so deep it reverberates long after your shadow has disappeared. Even those who appear indifferent at first are not immune. Humans are remarkably resilient, yes, but resilience does not mean indifference. It means that they absorb the absence, internalize it, and carry it forward in ways that shape their every interaction, every decision, every feeling. Absence molds them whether you want it to or not. You might think that walking away spares both parties discomfort, but in truth, it initiates a different kind of struggle. A struggle that is quieter, slower, and far more penetrating. The mind starts to play tricks, wondering why you left, what you thought, if you ever cared. Your absence whispers through every crack in their day, echoing louder than your voice ever did. Presence is a gift, but absence is a lesson, harsh and relentless, delivered without warning or mercy. And yet, the power of presence versus absence is not just about the individual who is left behind. It is about the one who chooses to leave. To walk away is to wield a force you may not fully understand. Every step you take away from someone resonates far beyond the moment of departure. Your absence becomes a catalyst, a disruptor, a force that shapes emotions and thoughts in ways you may never witness but cannot escape the consequences of. Being present requires courage, yes, but leaving requires reckoning. You might think it is easier to step back, to retreat, to hide behind silence, but the truth is that absence is never passive. It is active in its own destructive way. You leave behind a ripple that turns into waves, and those waves crash in the mind of the one you left, demanding acknowledgement, reflection, and ultimately, reckoning. Silence is not empty. It is loud. It roars in the mind, it echoes in the heart, and it reverberates through every corner of memory. When you refuse to speak, when you withhold your voice, you do not erase the situation, you amplify it. The absence of words becomes a statement, a verdict, a judgment that cuts deeper than any argument could. People do not need you to say anything for them to feel the weight of your silence. They feel it in the pauses, in the spaces between your gestures, in the nights when they wait for messages that never come. Silence has a way of getting inside the mind, planting questions that fester, doubts that grow, and insecurities that rise like shadows at dusk. It is not the absence of sound that matters. It is the presence of tension, the invisible pressure that makes every thought scream your name. The cruel power of silence is that it forces the person on the other side to fill in the gaps. When you walk away without explanation, when you leave words unspoken, the mind begins to invent scenarios, to create stories that may never have existed. Every imagined betrayal, every imagined insult, every imagined mistake gains weight in the absence of clarity. And while you may think this silence protects you or spares someone else, it does the exact opposite. Silence does not protect, it reveals. It exposes fears, it magnifies weaknesses, it brings every hidden emotion to the surface. Your quiet retreat is not neutral, it is a weapon. And whether you intend it or not, it cuts deeper than the sharpest tongue. Think about the nights when silence is at its loudest. The hours drag on, the mind circles, and questions multiply without answer. Did I do something wrong? Was it me? Did they even care? These thoughts become a drumbeat, relentless and unyielding, and every beat pounds with the rhythm of your absence. Silence forces confrontation, not in the presence of dialogue, but in the isolation of thought. It exposes vulnerability, magnifies longing, and highlights the spaces you once filled. When you were there, your words could soothe, reassure, clarify. When you leave them unspoken, the silence fills those spaces with shadows. The mind becomes a stage, and your silence is the lead actor performing a drama you never agreed to script. Silence also has the power to create doubt about intentions. Words, even when flawed, provide direction, explanation, context. Silence provides none. It does not offer clarity. It fosters confusion. Every pause, every withheld response, every step back invites analysis, introspection, and mistrust. What was your reason? Did you ever care? Will they ever return? The person left behind is trapped in a loop of speculation, replaying every moment of connection, every gesture, every glance, trying to decipher what cannot be explained. Silence speaks not with a voice, but with a weight that presses, a presence that never leaves, a shadow that follows relentlessly. And yet, silence is not always a weapon, though it often feels that way to the one enduring it. Silence is also a mirror, reflecting the consequences of choices. It forces acknowledgement where conversation is absent. The mind, left to navigate the vacuum you created, begins to confront truths that would have otherwise been ignored. And therein lies the danger and the power of silence. It grows inside a person, stretches across their thoughts, and lodges itself deep into their emotions. Your absence of words becomes more vivid than any words you could have offered. It is relentless, unavoidable, unforgiving. The silence you leave is not passive. It is a presence in itself, shaping, molding, haunting. Finally, silence reminds us that communication is more than speech. Every moment without words carries meaning. It teaches lessons, whether we intend it or not. It magnifies feelings, exposes vulnerabilities, and magnifies absence. Your silence is not empty, it is active. It travels, it lingers, it burrows. And every moment that you withhold explanation, withhold reassurance, withhold closure, it grows louder. It invades thoughts, it disrupts peace, and it challenges strength. In that quiet, the mind does not rest. It questions, it replays, it remembers. Silence speaks, and when it does not whisper, it shouts. When a person is left alone, truly alone, the mind begins to wander down corridors it never dared explore in the presence of others. Isolation is not merely a physical state, it is a psychological battleground. In the quiet, the heart becomes louder, the memories sharper, and every unanswered question grows heavier. The mind, left unchecked, becomes a storyteller, a manipulator, a trickster. It takes fragments of truth and stretches them, bends them, twists them until what is imagined feels real. You might think that walking away leaves them free, but freedom in isolation is an illusion. Their own thoughts become chains, and the echo of your absence is the lock. In isolation, reality becomes fluid. What once seemed clear now fractures. Every word you said, every promise you made, every gesture you performed is dissected and replayed over and over. The mind searches for patterns, for hidden meanings, for mistakes, and when it finds them, it magnifies them, turning small errors into monumental failures. The moments you considered insignificant, the conversations you thought were trivial, the jokes, the silences, the smiles, all become riddles to be solved. The mind is relentless. It refuses to accept simple explanations. It refuses to forget. Isolation allows it to reconstruct you in ways that may not even exist, creating ghosts of words and actions that never were. Loneliness does not soften the mind. It sharpens it in strange ways. It forces introspection, yes, but not always the kind that brings peace. It forces reckoning, but often without guidance. When you walk away, your absence forces someone into a state of internal interrogation. They question their worth, their decisions, their feelings. They replay the past, imagining alternative outcomes, imagining words they wish they'd spoken, actions they wish they'd taken. Your silence is the spark, and their imagination is the wildfire. It spreads uncontrollably, consuming clarity and leaving only smoke and confusion. Isolation amplifies emotions, distorts perception, and creates a reality that feels undeniable, even if it is entirely shaped by absence. Isolation also breeds fear, subtle and insidious. The unknown is terrifying, and your absence is an unknown that never ends. The mind, desperate for understanding, begins to fill the void with scenarios, each one more frightening than the last. Did they ever care? Will they come back? Was it my fault? These questions are not easily silenced, and in their absence, doubt multiplies. Isolation becomes a hall of mirrors where every reflection distorts, every echo taunts, and every shadow reminds them of what they have lost. The mind is no longer a passive observer. It becomes an active participant, rewriting memories, inventing motives, and projecting fears that may never exist outside their imagination. But there is also a certain tragic brilliance in this process. The mind, left to its own devices, begins to confront truths that might have been avoided in companionship. Isolation forces reflection, forces awareness, forces emotional reckoning. The tricks it plays are painful, yes, but they are also clarifying. It magnifies absence to show the impact of presence. It exposes mistakes to reveal lessons. It turns emptiness into a teacher, harsh but effective. And while the one left behind may struggle under the weight of these thoughts, the mind is working, whether they know it or not, to understand, to process, and ultimately to grow from what they feel. Finally, isolation proves that presence is not merely comforting. It is essential. The absence you leave does more than create emptiness. It triggers a storm in the mind of the person left behind. Their thoughts twist and turn, their emotions fluctuate, their memories replay, and every unanswered question echoes endlessly. The mind, clever and relentless, becomes both a sanctuary and a tormentor, a place where reality and imagination collide. Walking away may have seemed simple, but isolation ensures that your departure is never forgotten. It haunts, it challenges, it forces reflection. And in that crucible, the mind becomes both victim and witness, trapped in the trickery that only absence can create. Regret does not announce itself. It creeps in quietly, softly at first, like a shadow stretching across a sunlit room. But silence, the silence left in the wake of your absence, gives it room to grow, room to thrive, room to consume. When you walk away without explanation, without closure, the mind begins to take stock, and the heart begins to feel weight. Every choice, every word, every moment shared is dissected under the harsh light of reflection. And when there are no words to guide them, when there is no voice to soften the edges of confusion, regret settles in like a heavy fog, obscuring reason and clarity. It does not ask permission. It does not knock. It simply is. In the absence of dialogue, the mind replays moments relentlessly. Every conversation that went too long or ended too soon becomes a source of introspection. Every disagreement, every misunderstanding, every laughter or tear is examined under a microscope. Could I have done more? Should I have spoken up? Did I miss the signs? These questions loop endlessly, gnawing at confidence, feeding the ache left behind by your absence. Silence transforms memories into lessons, and lessons into regrets. The quiet does not soothe, it interrogates. And in that interrogation, the person left behind begins to see the cracks, the mistakes, and the opportunities that were lost, not because they were careless, but because the space you left forced them to confront truths they had ignored. Reflection born in silence is not always gentle. It is not polite. It does not tiptoe around pride or ego. When your absence lingers, it forces a reckoning. It forces someone to face themselves in ways they never had to before. And sometimes it is brutal. Regret sharpens the senses, uns the conscience, and exposes vulnerability. It turns small missteps into mountains, minor faults into glaring errors, and fleeting moments of doubt into profound realizations. It does not simply ask questions. It demands answers, even when the only answers are buried deep inside, waiting for the courage to surface. Silence becomes both the mirror and the magnifying glass, reflecting reality and enlarging its consequences. There is also a deceptive intimacy in silence. Left alone with the echoes of your absence, the person is forced to reconcile with themselves, with you, and with the world you shared. Reflection becomes a companion, relentless and persistent, whispering truths that had been buried under noise, under conversation, under the clutter of presence. Every memory becomes a teacher, every moment a lesson, and every heartbeat a reminder of what was and what might never be again. Regret, when nurtured by silence, becomes unavoidable. It is not a punishment. It is a revelation. It exposes what mattered most, what was lost, and what could have been preserved if only words had been spoken, if only presence had been sustained. Silence magnifies the importance of action. When there is no one to answer questions, no one to clarify, no one to explain. Reflection becomes the only currency. The mind begins to calculate, weigh, and measure every detail of the relationship, every act of kindness, every omission, every misstep. And in that quiet scrutiny, regret becomes a companion that cannot be ignored. It teaches, it sharpens, and it reminds the one left behind that absence has consequences far beyond the immediate moment. You may have walked away thinking the story was over, thinking your departure would be forgotten, but in the silence you leave, regret writes a narrative you will never witness, a narrative that shapes, molds, and lingers. Finally, regret and reflection born in silence are transformative forces. They are not fleeting emotions. They are processes that demand attention, understanding, and acceptance. Your silence does not simply fill the space. You fill their mind with the weight of what could have been. And in that weight, the person left behind is forced to confront truths, to understand their own heart, and to reckon with the absence that has reshaped their world. Reflection does not erase the past, and regret does not undo it. But together, they carve lessons into the soul, leaving indelible marks that no words can easily erase. Silence, in its unrelenting way, teaches what presence could not, the cost of absence, the depth of impact, and the power of what is left unsaid. Words fade, actions can be forgotten. But emotions, the ones you stir, the ones you leave behind, linger. Emotional impact is the true measure of presence and absence, the real currency in the ledger of human connection. When you walk away, it is not just your physical absence that matters. It is the weight of what you left behind, the void that presses on the heart, the ache that refuses to be silenced. People can recover from words, they can repair small gestures, but the emotional mark you leave is enduring. It burrows deep, shaping thoughts, influencing decisions, and echoing long after every argument has faded into memory. The most potent moments of influence are not measured in grand speeches or grand gestures. They are measured in subtle shifts of feeling, in the small tremors that unsettle the mind and heart. Every glance you gave, every word you withheld, every choice to step back or walk away, it all carries emotional weight. The person on the receiving end does not simply notice the absence, they feel it. And that feeling, raw and undeniable, becomes a force more powerful than any confrontation, more lasting than any apology. Emotional impact is not loud. It is insidious, creeping into every thought, every memory, and every quiet moment when reflection takes hold. Emotions demand attention, even when logic tries to suppress them. When you leave, the mind cannot ignore what it feels. Your absence becomes a presence in itself, a ghost that haunts every decision, every interaction, every fleeting thought. Happiness turns brittle, laughter feels hollow, and quiet moments become reminders of what is missing. The emotional void you leave is not neutral. It shapes perception, twists memory, and fuels longing. You may believe your departure goes unnoticed, but emotions never lie. They reveal truths that words often obscure, and they carry consequences you may never fully see. Emotional impact is also a teacher. It forces reckoning, reflection, and ultimately growth. When someone is left to feel the weight of your absence, they confront realities that would otherwise remain hidden. They question their own choices, evaluate their relationships, and reckon with the role you played in their lives. Pain, longing, and uncertainty are not merely suffering. They are signals, guiding them toward understanding, insight, and clarity. And while this process may be uncomfortable, it is undeniable. The heart remembers what the mind tries to rationalize, and the echoes of emotional impact remain long after explanations have faded. Even those who appear stoic or indifferent are not immune. Emotional resonance is not limited to outward displays of grief or anger. It lives quietly, persistently inside. Every unspoken word, every withheld gesture, every absence becomes a ripple, invisible but powerful, influencing thoughts, shaping behavior, and molding perception. Emotional impact does not require acknowledgement. It exists whether it is recognized or ignored. And because of this, walking away is never truly simple. It is never without consequence. The feelings you ignite, the doubts you provoke, the longing you leave, they are all part of a force more potent than any spoken declaration. Finally, emotional impact proves that true power lies not in what we do, but in what we leave behind. It is not in the grandiose speeches, the dramatic confrontations, or the carefully calculated gestures. It is in the echoes, the silences, and the spaces where your presence once was. The heart remembers what the mind tries to forget. It feels what the logic denies. It questions what the ego dismisses. Emotional impact is the proof of significance, the evidence of connection, and the legacy of absence. Walk away if you must, but understand this: the emotional weight you leave is heavier than any step you take, louder than any silence, and longer lasting than any words you might ever speak. Even in the wake of absence, even after silence has planted seeds of doubt and regret, there remains one undeniable truth: action has power. Actions can heal where words have failed. Actions can restore where silence has wounded. The cycle of pain, the spiral of overthinking, the torment born from unanswered questions, it is not immutable. It can be interrupted, redirected, even reversed. To act is to reclaim agency, both for yourself and for the person whose mind and heart have been caught in the turbulence your absence created. You may have walked away, but your story is not yet finished. Every choice you make from this point forward carries the potential to rewrite the narrative. Action begins with acknowledgement. It is not enough to hope that the person left behind has moved on, or to assume that time alone can erase the imprint of your departure. Recognition is required. Recognition of absence, of mistakes, of consequences. And when you face those truths, when you confront the reality of the silence you left behind, you create the possibility for change. Actions are not only gestures, they are statements. They communicate sincerity, remorse, and presence in ways that silence never could. To act is to declare without words that you understand the weight of your absence and that you are willing to bear it responsibly. Consistency is essential. One isolated gesture, one fleeting attempt may provide a momentary pause, a temporary relief, but it cannot undo the momentum of doubt and reflection that your absence has set in motion. True action is deliberate, measured, persistent. It requires showing up repeatedly, even when recognition is not immediate, even when skepticism is high, even when the wounds of silence are raw and unhealed. The power of consistent action lies in its ability to rebuild trust, to reestablish presence, and to counteract the destructive echo of absence. It is the antidote to uncertainty, the anchor in a storm of speculation, and the bridge from regret to reconciliation. Action also demands courage. To return after absence, to confront the questions that have grown loud in your silence, to face the emotions you left unresolved. These are acts of bravery. It is easier to remain silent, to avoid, to continue walking away. It is harder to step into the space you vacated and acknowledge its impact. But the only way to break the cycle is through courage. Each deliberate choice to engage, to communicate, to restore, chips away at the doubt, diminishes the fear, and rebuilds the emotional foundation that was fractured. Courageful action transforms absence from a wound into an opportunity for growth and understanding. The impact of action is amplified when it is intentional. Random gestures, apologies without meaning, words without commitment. They do little to reverse the effects of absence. But intentional, purposeful action carries a resonance that words cannot replicate. Showing up at the right moment, speaking from the heart, making sacrifices to demonstrate presence. These actions penetrate the wall that silence has built. They remind the person left behind that they matter, that their feelings are valid, and that the narrative is not yet complete. Action becomes a form of redemption, a tangible proof that absence need not define the entire story. Ultimately, action teaches the most important lesson: the past does not have to dictate the future. Absence has consequences, silence has weight, and emotional impact endures, but all of it can be addressed, mitigated, and transformed through deliberate action. Walking away may have started a cycle, but it does not have to finish it. The power to interrupt the pattern, to heal the wounds, to restore understanding lies in your hands. Every choice to engage, every step toward reconciliation, every moment of presence reshapes the narrative, proving that even after silence has done its work, action can rewrite the ending, or at the very least, give the story a chance to breathe, to heal, and to continue. So hear this: your choices matter. Every step you take, every word you leave unspoken, every silence you leave behind, it shapes lives, it shapes minds, it shapes hearts. Walking away is not just a movement, it is a statement. And silence is not empty. It is loud, it is relentless, and it is unforgettable. But here's the truth that changes everything: it is never too late to act. The cycle can be broken. The void can be filled. The shadows you left behind can be illuminated with courage, presence, and intentionality. You have the power to undo what absence began, not with excuses, not with empty gestures, but with action that speaks louder than silence ever could. So stand, step forward, speak, show up, because the mind can play tricks, the heart can ache, and regret can linger, but your actions have the power to reclaim, restore, and rewrite the story. Don't underestimate the weight of presence. Don't ignore the voice of your own choices. The silence is powerful, yes, but so are you. And one day, when they look back, they will remember not the absence, not the silence, but the courage it took to return, the strength it took to act, and the love that refused to stay quiet. That is the legacy you leave. That is the power you hold.